Hello, David. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Chris. It's good to talk to you again, man. It's been a long time. Thanks for having me.
And I'm really excited because today's guest is David Bieloh. And David was my graphic design teacher back in college 20 years ago. And today, David is the associate professor and director of graphic design at Central Washington University. David has also personally received national and international awards for his design work. And before we begin, David, where can people see your work?
They can start with my Instagram page. It's just Instagram.com/David Bieloh, and it's Bieloh, just all one word, my first and last name. So you can see my latest project there. You can also go to our website here at cwu.edu/art. And there's a faculty link, and you can look me up on that faculty link on that page. And there's some of my work there and a bio and description. And I'm also listed on the Worldwide Graphic Designers website, worldwidegraphicdesigners.com. That's all one word. So 3 choices if they don't want to just Google me, and that's also a possibility.
I really want to paint a picture before I ask my first question. And that is, when I was in school for graphic design, I personally did not know any professional graphic designers. I mean, this was a long time ago, right? So the internet was not as robust as it is today, and it was way more difficult to connect with a professional designer back then. And I say all this because our teachers like David Bieloh really inspired us. They were the benchmark of what we can become if we worked hard. They were working professionals, so their guidance really held a lot of equity. So, David, my first question to you is, who inspired you or what inspired you to become a graphic designer?
I was an artistic kid, so I grew up drawing, and I wanted to be a comic book artist someday. So I went to high school, typical art classes in the high school. I didn't know anything about graphic design, really nothing. I remember my high school art teacher had mentioned it at one point, and she brought in a guest speaker I grew up in Oklahoma. She brought this guy in from Okmulgee Tech. So, at the time, Okmulgee Tech, like the premier commercial art school, was what it was called in those days. And I remember he showed us some old mechanicals with overlays and, inked boards and things. And I thought it was just terrifying. I thought, man, I'm not at all interested in that. But I didn't really know what it meant. I got really close to going to the University of Tulsa and majoring in art, but it really just wasn't practical. So I went on and became a business major, majored in marketing at Oklahoma State, got out, worked as a social worker, but still was kind of wishing I had gone through an art program somewhere. Still not design. I didn't really know. But when my wife finished college, we had the opportunity to come to Dallas. And I remember back my high school art teacher telling us about the art institutes whenever she brought that Okmulgee Tech person in. And, I thought, well, here's my chance. I signed up at AI Dallas, just like you did years prior. I just marched in there as a 20-something-year-old kind of returning student and jumped into it. And it was all a surprise and a learning experience, and some of the best times of my life. I remember because I'd spent college at Oklahoma State doing what I hated. I didn't like business. I liked art. So I went through the program at AI and got a portfolio together. And sometime during that process, I realized this is what I was going to do. I was going to be a graphic designer in some capacity, and left school and immediately got some interviews and got some job offers and just started working for a manufacturing company as an in-house designer there in Dallas. That's how it started.
And there is no doubt if you wanted to be a VP of creative, a chief design officer, with your talent and your years of experience, you could have gone that route, that direction. Why did you choose to become a professor?
Well, I didn't choose to become one at first. But, when I started working as a designer, I didn't really know where my future arc of my career would go. I knew that I wanted to get out of the job that I was in and maneuver myself into a design studio somewhere in Dallas. I mean, it was a pretty tight-knit group, and they had a tendency to recruit from the same schools. So, I joined the AIGA and the DSVC. I started going to meetings and talks and stuff. I did my best to try to kind of position myself, but they continued working there at the manufacturing company. And one day out of the blue, and man, this was before email and before cell phones. And I guess she called me at home, but the department director from AI, where I'd been to school about 4 years earlier, called me and she said, "David, we need somebody to teach our color and composition class Tuesday and Thursday nights from 6:30 to 9:30. Susan Holden, who was the drawing one of the teachers at AI, had recommended me, she said. So I thought, well, okay, good extra money. And I think I could do this. So I said, when does it start? She said, well, next Tuesday. So I had about 5 days. I guess that was on Thursday. So I raced down to the Art Institute, and she handed me this old, dilapidated Xerox copy of a syllabus from who knows when. I don't even remember who taught that class. And she just like, here you go. And I literally jumped into it. Spent that weekend trying to put together a class and thought what I might be able to do to, I thought back to my experience and really focused on what I could do to make it better. So it started that way, Chris, and then it started pretty slow. I did that for a year. She called me back. I ended up doing a color and composition 2 class after that. After a year, Wanda Lundy, who was the director at the time, stepped down, and Lauren House, who moved into her position. And Lauren pulled me in and offered me a full-time teaching position because I'd had some good reviews and student evaluations and gotten some pretty decent work. So I kept my job at the company working as a designer and went over and started teaching full-time also at AI just to kind of test the waters, I really liked it. It was it was great being in the classroom. And I found that I kind of got a rapport with the students. It happened pretty quickly. I wasn't sure exactly at the time, but they seemed to trust me and enjoy having me in the class. So it was a give and take, and I really liked the energy of the whole situation. So after about a year of that, I stepped away from my full-time gig working in that manufacturing company and transitioned over to AI and started full-time. When you teach at AI, you're not technically a professor, you're an instructor. So that's really all I knew at the time. I did my best at that point, and it was in 1994 or 1995, to try to make the AI portfolios as competitive as I possibly could. So that's really how it all started for me. And it grew into me wanting to be a university professor later.
Did you know that when you went full-time as a teacher, did you know that you were going to do this so many years later? Like, did you have any temptations, or did anybody try to recruit you to get out and be a teacher and become an art director at some agency or some firm or some company?
Well, yeah, and I guess I should answer your question better last time too, because this relates. I've had opportunities over the years. I had offers here and there, and every single time, I always had to sit back and really evaluate. Because it's a life-changing decision. And when you decide to teach, you're really not doing it for the money, of course. You're doing it for the lifestyle and for the ability to pursue your own design or artistic interests. You have the luxury, I guess, to do that when you're teaching. But, I say the lifestyle, it's being able to work with young people and students and try to inspire them. So you're spending your days kind of doing these pursuits that are different than if you were working day to day as a designer somewhere. So I always came back to that, like what I really found important and what really drove me. Was I really in it for the money, or was I really in it for the fame, or trying to get things printed or published, or to work for a company working on branding work, or was it something else? So it always kind of came back around to where it really wasn't worth it for me to leave. But I just loved what I did, and I love what I do. Teaching design is the greatest thing. I tell my students that. I'll say, look, learning to be a graphic designer or communication designer is the second best thing on earth. And they always say, well, what's the first best thing? I tell them, well, teaching it. So I don't think you have to be the best designer to be a good teacher. I've seen some of the greatest designers on earth, around, come in and try to teach a class, and they just hate it. It takes a particular type of personality, I think, to make it work. I've had my chances, but I decided this was a career for me, and I made a long-term commitment to it around 2000, 2001, I guess. I knew it would take me about 10 years not quite 10 years, 5 to 10 years to end up in a professor position somewhere. And it did.
You have a lot of former design students who went on to do extraordinary things in their profession. I'm sure your current design students would like to know this answer. But what are the typical ingredients that you see in your students that usually ends up with them having a successful career?
Parents ask me that all the time when they come in and like tour art departments. What do they need to know? What type of person do they need to be? There is kind of a formula, I guess, because this career can be short-lived for those who aren't prepared. There's no tolerance for mediocrity. Attention to detail has to be extremely high, and you have to love it. So I tell my students, there's 20-something people in a classroom. There's going to be a few people in there, 2 or 3, that are really there seriously, that really want to dig in and are extremely passionate and are going to do twice everything we ask of them. They're going to spend their time in the library really immersed in it and online and learning about the history of design and learning about designers and learning about all the different studios around the country and who's doing what. And it's a really high bar we hold students to. So I tell them, you need to have this commitment to your chosen career. And through that commitment, you got to be willing to be really passionate about it and really engaged as much as possible. So there's a certain amount of that. You can't just be there. And I tell them you can't just be here to just get by and just finish work and just be an average graduate. Because, again, you're not going to, I don't think the industry supports that anymore. There was a time when it did, but it's just too competitive. And there's just too many good programs and too much good design happening and too many amazing student portfolios, man. You can see it all around the country. So that's the first part. The second part, I think students need to have a certain amount of artistic background. Design is not about being a technical computer operator. There's an aspect of it that is, of course, the production side and learning software. But, it's about critical thinking. It's about problem solving. It's about visual sensibilities. I think there has to be an element of that. So we can teach a lot of it. And no, you don't have to be able to be the greatest drawer in the world to be a designer, but I think you have to be able to rapidly visualize your ideas for people. Those are the main components. And then I think there's a certain amount of discipline and commitment that has to be there. Success isn't going to happen overnight. You've got to be willing to work hard and accept the fact that when you graduate from school, you're just starting. And I'm sure you can attest to this. I mean, you probably will be just blown away by how much you're going to learn in your first year out of school, because there's just so much we can do, and I recognize all my inadequacies and things I just don't teach well or don't have time to do. So a lot of it has to happen when they leave. So we try to prepare people to know how to kind of self-educate too. So being a good designer is somebody that's also willing to learn and open to education and continuing their education in all kinds of ways. You get a client that builds some product you've never heard of, you've got to learn all about that product and where it's made. Somebody wants to open a restaurant, some country you've never been to, and you've got to design menus and things. You need to understand the culture. So I think the better students coming in need to have this willingness to be kind of real broad in their thinking, open-minded, and excited about learning continually. It's like a continual learning process from the moment you graduate. I mean, from the moment you start school till you graduate and beyond.
If you could design a graphic design curriculum for college, and you probably can do this, I'm just curious though, is there a class that's not being taught that you think should be taught in college that it's not there currently?
Well, yes. I mean, like the places that I've been compared to the places I'm not. I mean, I can always find schools that are teaching everything. But there are some things, like learning how to really be an entrepreneur, a design entrepreneur. I really had never had that as part of the curriculum till I got here at Central Washington University. It really didn't start till we hired our most recent design professor. He's teaching a class, Justin Beckman is his name, where he goes over students how to kind of start that process. And that's not my area at all, really. I'm a freelancer and have been forever, but the business side of design is the other part. And again, this is one you can probably attest to, and TK and everybody else that you went to school with. You probably learned so much about the business after you got in the business. So there's that part of it too, I think. So I think those would be good additions to a curriculum. And then maybe, and there's a lot of it, I guess, I've learned along the way, things like really understanding large integrated branding systems. This idea that, a logo is not a brand. As I've taught over the years, I've picked up on a lot of stuff that I've kind of added to my classes that I always wish was there. Good question.
That's very insightful. Has any former students ever come to you for advice on anything, whether it's negotiation, career advice, their next company they should work for? I'm sure they do, because I know you have a great relationship with a lot of your past students.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. It's ongoing and continual, and it goes back 25 years. I mean, I'll get somebody will reach out to me on social media or say, "Hey, Mr. Bieloh, like, wow, I have not talked to you since 1999. and yeah, I get those questions all the time. I'd say probably, it's hard to put a number on it, but at least half a dozen times a year from all over. And a lot of times I'll get asked to write letters or serve as a reference to give advice on how to charge for a poster or a logo design or a book cover. I mean, it really runs the gamut, these types of questions, but they're just like what you asked there. I mean, should I take this job? What do you think? Is it worth it? Is it worthwhile? Or, I've had them interested in wanting to come back and teach. I've got a few former students who are now teaching, which is always really cool. And a lot of times they'll ask about graduate school and how to apply for grad school and what that whole world is like. So, yeah, and that's one of the things I love about this is just getting those types of questions and getting back in contact with those people from all around.
That's definitely a testament to you that you're still reaching out to get advice. That's fantastic. I really want to transition to logos. Now, when I think of you, I think of our logo class. It's the first time I was introduced to logos, and prior to that, I would look at logos and not think much of it until you start designing logos. And your work has been recognized by LogoLounge. What an awesome platform to show your students that you are an expert in logos. When I look at all your logos, I love them all. But is there any one or two that you really particularly love?
Well, I think I like the stories behind them even better. And that might help, I guess, impacts my choices. I did one called Ham Bones Barbecue. And it's just,
I love that
just
one.
A crazy name, And this guy just had this barbecue truck. And he had a funny name for it. And, I suffered over that for weeks, man, trying to figure out what to do that wasn't just so expected or such a cliche or just another chopped up pig. And I was in the shower one day, and my brother, who's a chef, I just got off the phone with him. And it just dawned on me. I thought, a chef's hat looks a lot like a bone. And I had my forced connection. I jumped out of the shower, dripping wet, and grabbed a pencil and sketched something. I like that one. It was fun. That one's done a lot for me. It's funny. Run House, one I did. My brother-in-law had a running store in Benicia, California, right there. Beautiful spot downtown. And he wanted to call it the Run House. So it's the same thing. It's funny. If I think back to when I taught local class, you probably remember I've taught the same way for years. You do a ton of thumbnails and a lot of research and a lot of revisions and changes. And, we nitpick it to death. But my reality is so much different than that now. It's like 2 weeks of just thinking about it and sketching on whatever piece of paper surface I've got as I think of stuff. And I did this for this Run House one forever too. And then finally I just thought, I'm overthinking this. It's got to be so simple. I mean, it's a house and it's running. So I just made a guy running with a house on his head. I tried to do like this gestalt, with the positive, negative, and it worked out. So that one, I had some fun with that one. I like that one. I had another one, River Stone. It's just a dry cleaning store. And again, I love these ones where I've got some opportunity with a fun name, because it really all starts with the words and the name, because then you can start trying to build associations and try to find the tension between the two sides of it. And so that one was a fun one for me too. And there's other ones. They all have kind of a story. I'll give you those three.
Great. And I can't think of a better person to ask this question, but with technology being part of our lives and people are looking at things digitally on screens, I've noticed that logos have changed. I think the classic AT&T, the UPS logo, they've now had facelifts. They're beveled. They have reflections. Does technology make you change the way you teach your students about logo design, or is everything still grounded by the traditional basics of logo development from the past?
We all scream whenever we see these redesigns, right? They redesign Paul Rand's UPS logo or whatever it may be. My Brand Ed's that's a great website where you can see the revamped version. I think it's called Brand Ed, right? I think.
I'll check that out.
Yeah. And it's happening constantly, Chris. And it's just these facelifts to these logo designs. And Bill Gardner on LogoLounge does a annual trends report based upon all the submissions they get in LogoLounge every year. And so they update that report every year, and it has all the latest kind of surface effects, right? Like you said, bevels and everything's a swoosh or everything's flat or there's a shine or a reflection or a drop shadow. But I'll tell you this, I always come back to what, these guys like Saul Bass and Paul Rand and others would say. They were like, there's some old, really standard expected rules. I remember one of them. If it doesn't work in black and white, it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you can't scale it down to a real small size where it would fit on the side of a golf ball and still have it read, it's not working. Or if it's dependent upon an effect or a gradient, or if it's dependent upon a drop shadow, or it's dependent upon any type of surface kind of treatment, right? If it has any dependency, then you've done something where you've cut a corner, or you're giving it kind of something to try to stand up on that's not valid. So I don't start that way. I start the way I always started. It's about the idea. It's about designing something that's smart. I come from Texas, and I've been influenced a lot by the Texas design school and the Texas designers of the past, going back to, Woody Pearl and all those guys, Rob Lawton, and all the generation of people they influenced that you may know, like Tom Ninus and Rolando.
Absolutely.
Brian Owens, and they'll all tell you the same thing. It's, you get a good idea, and you get people, when they see it, they have this moment, they make the connection, they feel like they're in on the joke. I mean, think about it. The first time you notice the white arrow in the FedEx mark, I still
great
today
example.
show that to students. Yeah, they haven't seen it. And the moment they have that realization, it's just like this massive light bulb goes off. So that's what I spend my time doing, is trying to just expose students, and always have, just to what I think is important. And then once we get the idea, then we start talking about the best way to render it. Or does it need texture? Or does it need a bevel, right? I mean, those are all finishing moves just to enhance the communication and the storytelling. So I don't ignore it. I just don't start with it.
Great example with FedEx. I mean, that logo is simple, executed perfectly, and just a awesome logo. And you're right. Once you see that arrow,
it is.
You never forget it.
Well, yeah, it's such a cliche now, but I'll have people that don't believe me when I point that out. Oh, that was just, it just happens when you put those letters together, and then I show them it doesn't just happen. That had to be manipulated. Then I pull up the article where Lyndon Leader talks about why he did that. So there's, again, I think students and all people wanting to get into this, once they become more exposed to the thinking behind stuff, I think it's very enlightening.
Was that Lindor did that, and the big ad firm? Landor?
His name was Lyndon Leader. Lyndon Leader, I think is his name, for Landor and Associates. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It was a rebrand. They were Federal Express.
That's right. That's right.
So they renamed it and redesigned it at the same time.
I'm curious of this. When you look at a design and you say, man, that's a home run, what exactly are you looking for?
It's a combination, right? So I'm sure everybody who's in this world has done this. You see something somebody's done and you just shake your head in disbelief. You cannot believe you never thought of that. It's just I call it, it's just a head scratcher, where it's just so smart and so simple and was so obvious, but apparently it was only obvious to that person who saw it. And that's part of that formula too. When parents ask me, or when students ask me what they need to put in their portfolios, and I tell them, look, if you can have 10 or 15 pieces where every one of them generates that sort of response, these places are going to find you positions to work. It doesn't happen that often. It's not easy to do, but that's my main thing. If I have that moment, kind of that aha moment, that smile in the mind when I look at anything, a poster or a book cover or a logo or a system, how the idea is carried through an entire system of packages, or from looking through a big, beautiful book somebody did, how it goes from the cover and just weaves its way all the way through this elaborate multi-page document, and how the idea just keeps building and building, like the designer was just this fountain of concept. That I think is just incredible. And then, of course, I think we all appreciate beautiful work, right? And beautiful use of color. And so the execution, of course, is part of it, a huge part of it.
Several years back, I was an art director at this healthcare company, and my boss said, Chris, I need you to build a team. And so I got some portfolios and put it in front of my boss. And my boss says, I'm going to challenge you to find somebody who is better than you. And I said, well, that's not going to be fair, because I've been doing this for years and we're hiring a junior designer. And he said, I don't care. He needs to be, or she needs to be better than you, because their success will be your success. Now, let me turn back to you. Have you ever had any students that you said to yourself, wow, this guy or girl is better than me now. Does that ever happen? And because you're such a talented designer. Okay, I want to hear about this.
Happens every year, more often than that. I mean, I've got students right now. I mean, if they listen to this, that are going in their senior year. I've got a few that have got potential that's just beyond me. But it happens every round. I say to myself, how could these guys get any better? How could I end up with better students in this group or this 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever? And it's just like a treadmill, man. It's just always they're coming they're coming through all the time. At least the potential that they have and their sensibilities and I think back. I can think of ones at AI, Chris. Too. I mean, I had students, you included. I had a guy named what was his name, Josh Bray. I don't know how I remembered his name right now. I remember I did a whole pitch on conceptual thinking, and I showed a bunch of poster examples, and they were doing posters for the AIGA. I just did a mock. You might remember that. I think I did a mock.
Yes, AIGA, I do remember that. That's my favorite class.
Yeah. Oh, it was fun. And I remember Josh was just real quiet, and it'd be funny if he listens to this. I haven't talked to him in 15 years. He came back in the next time, and he said, "Mr. Bieloh, I think I've got it." That's what he got. So he laid down 3 posters he'd done. And they were all beautiful force connections. One of them had these cards, AIGA, we made them out of cards. He flipped a 9 upside down and made it into a G and lowered it a little bit in the car. I mean, they were just so smart. He did a thing for the San Francisco Bay Area Carnival, I remember, and he turned the Golden Gate Bridge in the top of a circus tent. It was just these real obvious force connections. So I thought right then, this guy is way smarter than I am on this stuff. All 3 of these things came to him over a weekend. It's happened over and over and over again. So sure. I mean, at AI, at PW, at Austin P, at OBU over there in Arkansas, at RIMCAD, it happens, and it happens here at Central. It happens every year. So
wow,
to answer your question, yes.
Interesting.
I think it's just now whether they live up to it or where they go with it, it's been up or down. That's kind of that's a roller coaster. But at the moment, when I'm observing them in the moment and where they are right then, I just think, gosh, this person could just be so great.
I'm glad you didn't list any of your current students now. They may not listen to you after dropping their names on.
Yeah, I think there's some with a lot. And last year they graduated, and the year before, it's just, like I said, it's ongoing. I had a student get a job over at Cornell Anderson in Seattle. They're now called Sid Lee, biggest agencies in the Northwest. And I was so proud of her. Her name's Amanda Smith. It took all spring quarter for her to get there, but it was just through a contact. I just knew a guy there who was a former student here, and I put her in contact with him. Then I made the reference, and it was all in her hands. It was in her court, and she went on, and she's been hired by them, and so there's a lot of stories like that, I think. And the best part for me is seeing them when they first come in and where they are when they start, and it can be really so low as far as what a design world career would be. And by the time they get to this other point, that's what makes it amazing, at least on my side of it.
Let me transition and ask you this question. If somebody wanted to follow your career and wanted to do what you're doing, what advice do you give them? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Yeah, they wanted to be a teacher. They want to be a teacher, a professor.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, and I get that question sometimes too. You have to, I think, first of all, you need to recognize whether or not you think this is going to be for you. So if let's approach it from the position of a designer. So we've worked as a designer for a number of years. You've got a big career behind you, and now you're ready to teach. I think the first thing those people ought to do is try to find an adjunct position or, a contract position for a junior college or a for-profit somewhere, or even a state school. I think sometimes they can make it work if the person has enough experience, and just teach a class. Go in there blind, and just do your best and see if you like or if you can deal with the situation, because it's a whole different situation. You're no longer working as a designer, either by yourself or with a group. You're standing in front of a group of people who are staring at you, waiting for you to share things and explain to them how to do things and walking them through. So that would be my first bit of advice. Just test the waters, because you'll find out real quick whether or not that's something you want to spend time with, because it can just wipe people out who aren't used to that. because it's nerve-wracking. You won't believe how your heart could pound. I'm 26 years in, Chris. Every time I walk in the fall to start a class, I'm still a little bit nervous.
Wow.
So, yeah, if you can imagine somebody's never done it before, it's like walking in front of on stage. That's first thing. I think you've got to have this personality that's willing to be extremely flexible and patient. I think that you've got to be somewhat of a storyteller and have this maybe kind of ability to express yourself through words and tell stories and keep people interested when you talk to them. You've got to be a good listener. So there's a lot of, I think, interpersonal skills that need to be there. If you're aloof and standoffish or a total introvert, you may hate it, right? That's the first thing. So test the waters, kind of do a little self-reflection. And then you're going to need to get the correct credentials on the education side. So if you want to be a university professor, you've got to have a terminal degree. So the terminal degree in design is the MFA. So you've got to find a place where you can do an MFA. The University of North Texas has one. Texas A&M Commerce at the Dallas University Center has a great one, and my good friend Virgil Scott runs that program, so I'm putting a plug in for him. UNT's got a strong program, too, that I went through, graduated in 2006. I have everything great to say about Michael Gibson and Jack Sprague, that was there at the time, and Eric Ligon, and Keith Owens and that group. So incredibly rigorous, but you'll need a degree to position yourself, and then you're ready. So if you've got some design background, you've won some awards, you've worked with clients, and you think you'll be good at it, and you think you'll love it, and you get that MFA degree, you can go anywhere in the world.
That's great insight.
And you have to be ready to forego a lot of income. I mean, if you're a designer making six figures, you might as well forget it. I mean, you're going to start over on the money side of things. So that's the other part of it. And that's the reason a lot of designers choose not to do it. They can't afford to do it.
Can I ask this question? As a professor, the great part is I would assume that you can also pick and choose your projects that come to you, right? So that
Yes.
makes it, you can still supplement your income, and you can just kind of really choose what projects you want.
That's the way I do it. And I've kept it going because you have to get tenure. Now I'm at a college, right? If you're a tenure track assistant professor is the way you start. In order to get it, you've got to be doing client work. You've got to get published. You've got to win some awards. You've got to write. And so there's a formula to the professional side of it, the scholarship side of it that has to be fulfilled.
I didn't realize that.
So they expect, so they expect us to have to. Now, at the Art Institute, no, we did not. AI, that for-profit, it's all just teaching. I mean, when I was at AI, Chris, the teaching load was 5 classes a quarter, and I never taught less than 6.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved up to TW, which was my first university job, we taught 2 or 3.
Wow.
And I felt like I was on vacation because I had really been through the fire at AI. And I'll tell you that, I'll add that to my other part of this. If you want to teach, you need to start someplace where you really have to teach a lot. I still think to this day that benefited me more than anything. It's my 8 years in the AI system because, you teach them 6 classes a quarter, 4 quarters a year. You have time to really hone your craft, right? It's like anything else. It's just thousands of hours in front of students and working with projects and changing them. And I still tell people that, I see people going to grad school, straight out of grad school, go straight into a university to teach at the university level. And I don't know how well it goes. They have no teaching background other than their graduate experience, right? So I would tell anybody, go to a junior college, go to AI, go to a for-profit, and just get thrown into it. Because you've got to spend the time to get good at it, I think. But yeah, I pick and choose my clients. I'm real picky about them. So, I pick the ones I think are really going to benefit me. So if I think the Ham Bones comes along, I think I can win an award with it or it has some potential, I might be more inclined to go for that one than something that's a little bit more mundane.
Gotcha.
That makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
David, I wanted to ask you about your Instagram page. It's really interesting. I don't know where you came up with the concept. Please tell us a little bit about that Instagram page and what's the message there.
Okay. It's called the United Colors of the Apocalypse. So it really all started with the wildfires that are happening here on the West Coast, state of Washington. We had a lot of smoke, low visibility, bad air quality here in Ellensburg, Washington. And I was just getting sick of dealing with it. But, I thought the sky was quite beautiful. It would change colors, different shades of blue, gray, and brown and red. And I saw these pictures from Oregon and California. They were just unbelievable. and they're just ominous, right? But I thought there's some beauty there. Maybe there's something I can do to make something positive out of this terribly negative situation that everybody's suffering with. That was in my mind. I remembered Pantone has this color of the year thing every year, and last year they did classic blue, and I saved a screenshot of that. They put a white box around the color. They call it classic blue. So one day I just saw a meme online, and somebody compared a sky to like the skies of Mordor, Lord of the Rings. And I saw another one. They called it like then they put a color after it. It was like the end of the world orange or apocalypse orange. And I just thought, why hasn't somebody really run with this? Because my sky looks different, and I think I could come up with some names. So that's where it started. I just sat down and I started taking. I ran outside and took pictures and emailed my friends in California and Oregon, my former students in Oregon and Portland, and they all started sending me pictures. And before you know it, I think I had like 20 or 30 swatches done that first day. It just went from there. I had a lot of fun because it really brought together all the stuff I love, conceptual kind of thinking and the humor of it, and kind of dark humor and forced connections. And that was, I think that was the beauty of it for me and the fun part. And it just turned into this viral thing. I found out it'd gone viral a couple of days later. And I started getting people sending me swatches from all over the country, people I didn't know, and strangers and colleagues from years past and friends and you name it. I got some from Australia.
Wow.
Which I didn't use because it just didn't make sense. Didn't really fit, right? So that's where it started. We ended up with 130 swatches. I got picked up in American Prospect magazine, East Coast magazine. They published it. I wrote a piece for that. And then it got picked up and mentioned in the New Yorker here the other day. So I put together a big poster of all the swatches I'm going to make available for purchase, and I'm going to give all the proceeds to the American Red Cross. They got a benefit page for people who suffered from the Western wildfires. So it's a project totally just out of my head and for a good cause. And it was collaborative and brought people together in a time where we're so divided in this country. And it's been a dark year, COVID and everything else and politics. So it was fun just to do something collaborative and to kind of bring, and there was no question about all this. People came together and it made people happy. So yeah, United Colors of the Apocalypse. It's been fun.
For you listeners, you should definitely check out his Instagram page. It's really cool, and that poster is really awesome. David, let me shoot you some rapid fire questions, and these are just going to be quick, and I'm not going to follow up on them, but this should be fun. Here's the first one. What type of music do you listen to when you're designing?
Oh, I'm a proud '80s person, and I don't hesitate to pull out my best of greatest hits Journey collection. So Journey and Boston and Foreigner and Van Halen, and here's one that'll make everybody freak out: Europe. So yeah, I haven't changed a bit. I'm still listening to the same stuff. Night Ranger, Toto, things from the '80s is where I'm at, man.
Survivor? I'm kidding.
Survivor, absolutely. Yeah, I saw them in concert in Las Vegas.
These young kids don't know these names. I hope they know Journey. I mean, that's
oh,
everybody
me too.
should.
Everybody
should know
I mean,
Journey.
Don't Stop Believing. It's become pretty iconic.
I'm asking myself this question: after all the years you've been teaching, is it possible for you to remember most of your students?
Yeah, very possible. I mean, it's my students have done everything for me. They are the ones who inspire me. So the work that they do and the people that they are really resonates. So sure, that's why I'm in contact with them, going all the way back to 1994, 95. I taught at the Art Institute of Seattle for 1 year, about 10 months. And that's the only place I've been where I have not made contact with anyone. But beyond that, yeah, I'm in contact with a lot of my former students, hundreds going on way back, and I still talk to them and help them when I can, and I still remember their work. So a lot of times I remember the work before I remember their names. And I encounter them in weird places. I was in an airport one time, random airport, I think Chicago maybe, or Miami, one of them. And somebody was yelling my name from way back behind me, just in the terminal. And I turned around, and here came this girl, and I recognized her and I remember her work. I did not remember her name. So it took about 2 or 3 minutes of conversation before it registered. And that's happened a few times. So yeah, I remember my students, and I think very highly of all of them. I'm very proud of all of them and all that they've done.
Wanted to get your thoughts on design awards and recognition, because you've been recognized and you receive a lot of recognition from your work. What's your thoughts on those? And which one of those are you most proud of?
Recognition and having work in certain publications it certainly feels good when it happens. I remember, for years I wanted to be in Graphis and like their poster annual or their logo annual, because some of these competitions are more approachable than others. Like if you want to submit for some, it doesn't cost you anything. If you want to submit work in others, it costs a lot of money. Every entry can be over $100. So there's aspects of it that I really don't like, but I also recognize that they have to print these big, beautiful books and annuals. So I support Graphis, and I've had 4 logos and get in a logo annual for Graphis, and that made me really happy. I actually had 4 awards and an honorable mention, so I really had 5 in there. So I kind of see that as a group. I'm pretty proud of that. I've been in the poster annual 3 times, and LogoLounge. I'm equally proud of all those. There's some that you may not know of. There's the Summit International Awards. So I'm actually most proud of this one because Summit they have thousands of entries every year in each category, in a lot of categories. But I've won 2 golds in Summit. One for a book cover and another one for a logo.
Can I ask you
which?
Sorry to cut in, but can I ask you which logo and which book cover so I could see those?
The book cover is one called "Quench Your Thirst with Salt."
Oh, I saw that's fantastically designed.
Quench Your Thirst with Salt, and I took the pictures myself on the carpet in my office. And then I think it's the Handbones logo now. It's possible I'm wrong on that. It's been a while. I think it was the Handbones logo. But I learned after the fact that in each category, if they had 800 entries or 1,200 entries or whatever, they've only given 1 gold. Wow. So unlike Graphis, where they might have 20 pages of gold posters or 30 or 50 pages of silvers, Summit gives 1 in each category that's gold. So because of that, they asked me to come back in and actually serve as a judge on 2 different occasions for Summit. So you had to kind of earn your stripes to be a judge for them. So I was happy with that.
Wow! Congratulations. That's an interesting story.
Yeah.
And
thanks. Yeah, it's fun.
For those listeners, definitely check out that poster or that cover of that book. That was
that book cover. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Final question here is: how do you personally define success, or what do you want your legacy to be?
That's a tough question. How I personally define success, you find something that you do that you love. It's such a cliche, like where it doesn't feel like work, where you find yourself working to make the job be what it needs to be, but you don't think of it that way. That's what being a professor has been for me, where, I'm out jogging, I'm thinking about project for my upcoming class, or I'm thinking about what I want to change, make for another project. And it kind of becomes your world, where you're not thinking of it as a job. So I think if anybody can find that, or once you find that, where you're just doing what you love and it feels right, then I think you've done something good. As far as my legacy, I want my students, all the students, and there's been a lot of them, if I've impacted them in a positive way, I hope, then I can't ask for more than that. If I've had this impact on students going back, and whether I know it or not, because, I don't know necessarily what impact I'm having until afterwards, a lot of times. So that idea, I think, means a lot to me professionally. Personally, I've got a 12-year-old son here, and my legacy, I hope, can show through him, and he can learn and grow and become an incredible adult someday, which I know he will. I'm very proud of him. And I'm very proud of all those students, too. I'm very extremely proud of all my students.
Well said, and you definitely impacted me. You've made me enjoy my experience learning about graphic design. I personally want to thank you for preparing myself and countless of your past students and current students throughout the years to become successful professionals. And thank you again, and I appreciate that. Absolutely. And David...
hey, let me mention one thing here, too, before you close. You were part of a special group, they're AI, that I had students in the late 90s, early 2000s, where I was really fortunate, I think, to have that group of students, you and TK and Alex and so many others, right? Jack, and I'm in contact with so many of them. So, you guys made my job worth it. So thanks to you, too.
I appreciate you saying that. And thank you. And till next time, everybody, take care and bye.